Hello again, everyone. Welcome to Washington Gun Law TV. I am Washington Gun Law President William Kirk. Thanks for joining us. Hey, for those of you who've been geeking out on the channel for a while, you know we've been doing a lot of videos about the legislative session here because there are a lot of pretty radical ideas kicking around in Olympia, many of which have a good chance of becoming law. One of those is House Bill 1705. Now, we've already done a couple of videos on House Bill 1705, but just to get you up to speed, that would ban 80% lowers and all untraceable firearms. Well, it's passed out of the House, it's in the Senate, and really the last stand occurred earlier this week where there was a public hearing on House Bill 1705. So let's spend a few minutes and learn about how the public reacts to House Bill 1705. Okay, before we get rolling, you guys know the drill. If you like this video, click that like button down below if you want to stay up to date on issues related to your Second Amendment rights, statewide, nationwide level, or anything really specific to this legislative session. Go ahead and click that subscribe button. Click the little bell logo if you want to be notified when we post new videos. And most importantly, let's keep the comments and discussions coming. That's how we're going to make sure that we're getting our videos out to more lawful and responsible gun owners like yourself. Okay, so on Monday, February 21st, there was a public hearing on House Bill 1705. Now, there was a lot of other issues on that legislative agenda that day. There was actually 4 bills that were discussed. I only am going to show you clips from what pertains to House Bill 1705. So, to get us all set up, let's hear committee staff member Tim Ford introduce the bill.
Before you is engrossed substitute House Bill 1705. Concerning ghost guns. And by way of background, Washington law defines untraceable firearms as any firearm manufactured after July 1, 2019 that is not an antique firearm and that cannot be traced by law enforcement by means of a serial number affixed to the firearm by a federally licensed manufacturer or importer. Our state law prohibits the manufacture of an untraceable firearm with intent to sell, and a violation is a Class C felony. Washington law also further prohibits knowingly or recklessly allowing, facilitating, aiding, or abetting the manufacture or assembly of an undetectable firearm or untraceable firearm. What engrossed substitute House Bill 1705 does is it clarifies the definition of an untraceable firearm to include not just federal firearms manufacturers and importers, but also federal firearm dealers in compliance with all federal laws and regulations. It defines a frame or a receiver as providing a structure designed to hold fire control compartments. Any part with a serial number is presumed to be a frame or receiver. An unfinished frame or receiver is also defined as one that is partially complete and is marketed or sold to be used as the frame for a functional firearm once completed. The bill adds to the existing prohibition on the manufacture of an untraceable firearm. It is unlawful for any person to manufacture, cause to manufacture, assemble, or cause to assemble an untraceable firearm with intent to sell. And then the new provision prohibits the manufacturer without an intent to sell. And violations start with a civil infraction of $500 for the first offense, followed by a misdemeanor for the second offense and a gross misdemeanor for all subsequent offenses. Other prohibitions related to an untraceable firearm include the sale, offer to sell, transfer, or purchase of an untraceable firearm. And again, the violations start with a civil infraction of $500 for the first offense, followed by a misdemeanor for the second offense and a gross misdemeanor for all subsequent offenses. And then there are prohibitions on an unfinished frame or receiver. No person may sell, offer to sell, transfer, or purchase an unfinished frame or receiver.
All right, well, the public comments kicked off with 2 individuals in favor of the bill, Liz Berry and Sergeant Jordan Ferguson of the Spokane Police Department. They testified as follows.
Gun violence is a public health crisis that has reached record levels in our state. It is now the leading cause of death for children and teenagers, and as a mother, that is terrifying to me. We know that gun violence is preventable. Gun violence is preventable. And I believe as lawmakers, we must do everything we can to prevent deaths in our communities and keep people safe. And that is why I'm so proud to bring forward this bill today, which very simply will ban untraceable homemade ghost guns that are easily bought online and assembled at home. These guns are dangerous because we have no way of tracing them, and people do not need to get a background check to obtain them. I am so grateful for you for hearing this bill today and helping us close this dangerous loophole in keeping our community safe. Thank you so much, Senator.
I'm here to speak in support of House Bill 1705. Our unit actively tries to separate firearms from domestic violence perpetrators due to the threat firearms pose to the victims. We also actively investigate denied firearms transactions. Technology has changed almost the way everything we do in life. It's made it possible to print and build firearms at home, no questions asked. Our state passed strong background checks laws to stop people like convicted felons and domestic violence abusers, whom we all agree should not have access to firearms. They cannot get their hands on one at a gun show in a parking lot or via purchase arranged over the internet. These guns allow people to circumvent that law, print and build their own weapon at home. That is not right, and it puts domestic violence victims at risk.
Now, similar to the public hearing that we had on Senate Bill 5078, there were some fantastic pieces of testimony given by people of color. And I think that they bring a perspective to this argument that many of us do not have. So let's hear from Andrew Weiss, who actually also very eloquently testified on the SB 5078, Alana Curry, and Autumn Bennett.
House Bill 1705 was drafted by well-intentioned people. However, these people failed to consider that it creates yet another pointless, nonviolent possession crime that will impact my community. By forcing people to pay a licensed dealer to engrave a firearm, this bill creates an immediate financial burden. It will force low-income people to make a choice. Do we charge it to a high-interest credit card, or do we pay the electric bill? Will manufacturers be flooded with work orders and raise prices? Pay up, or take a chance of being another person of color with a nonviolent possession charge? Black people are more likely to get searched by police and be charged with nonviolent possession crimes, just like the one this bill creates. This will lead to an even greater number of black people arrested in jail for possessing harmless blocks of metal and plastic. It'll be yet another legitimate reason why my community fears police interactions. The issue was further exacerbated by the unclear definition of unfinished labor receiver. Any adequately sized block of metal or plastic could easily be converted into a firearm using widely available tools. Smaller blocks of material can be welded together. Supporters forget that firearms have been produced since the 1300s. This is not rocket science. It's not hard to do. Will I get arrested if I don't pay to have serial numbers added to the bar stock I use for art projects? What about the pistons in my car engine? Maybe my wife needed a serial number on her lipstick tubes. Israelis use all of these to produce firearms in their war of independence. This bill does not prevent criminals from producing firearms. It's just a tax on gun owners and an excuse for police to be able to arrest whomever they want, whenever they want, for simple possession of common items. Please do not pass House Bill 1705.
I am against House Bill 1705. The legislature has promised to do more for the Black community by creating more inclusive laws, but time and again, those laws have unintended consequences on Black lives. The legislature argued for hours about the desperate impact on Black lives regarding police reform bills. But when it comes to firearm policies, they seem to have a tone deaf. 40% of all of non-violent firearm possession arrests are of African Americans, which make up 13% of the U.S. population. This law creates yet another nonviolent possession law that will impact my community. Given the supply and demand, the cost of engraving are going up. How will my people afford that? Politicians fan fear by equating gun ownership with white supremacy, but history proves otherwise. From Black Wall Street massacre in Tulsa in 1921 to the Mulford Act of 1967 and many more instances, the Blacks have been targeted for more gun control laws by the very people who claim to be helping. This bill doesn't take firearms out of the hands of criminals. It certainly won't keep firearms out of the hands of the rich, but it will have a big impact on my community. So please vote no. Thank you.
10 years ago, I was addicted to heroin and meth and was witness to many criminal activities. I've seen how, and with great ease, criminals would steal, purchase, sell, or trade firearms, all illegally, and use them to further their criminal activities. No laws on the books prevented these actions. I'm tired of bills that are aimed at turning law-abiding citizens into criminals. You cannot make crime more illegal, as it seems this bill is trying to do, with claims that the legality of ghost guns make crimes easier for criminals to commit. This bill also claims that if enacted, It will mitigate the harms caused by these types of weapons. I find this difficult to agree with, considering criminals do not follow laws. The laws of the legislature are not the laws of the streets, and each step that this body takes to make it more difficult for myself and other women out there to obtain and keep our firearms only makes the jobs of the real criminal element easier. In a time where crime rates are going up, break-ins, assaults, and robberies are out of control, and where our law enforcement being hamstrung in their ability to help us, this is the last thing that I need.
Now, of course, in support of the bill, we always have to parade all of the horror stories, the graphic novels out there, and this hearing, of course, was no different. Kim Gatburton obviously suffered a tremendous personal tragedy. She shared her story.
My son Joshua was shot and killed. I probably can't see that, but my son Joshua was just 20 years old when he was shot and killed in Tacoma, Washington by a gun that was purchased illegally and without a background check. This life-saving bill would build and support existing laws that we have put already into place and help families not experience the tragedy that my family lives with and deals with daily. The readily available ability of unserialized and untraceable ghost guns undermines that system and evades the law. What gets me, I guess, mostly about this is that 16-year-olds are getting access to firearms and killing their classmates, and 14-year-olds. Yes, 14-year-olds.
And then, of course, if we really want to get some expertise on public safety, if we really want to hear from somebody who really knows how to keep our communities safe, well, who better than Lisa Herbold of the Seattle City Council?
1705, because this bill will close a very dangerous loophole in our background check laws and can help keep communities safe. Over the last 10 years, Washingtonians in the city of Seattle have strengthened background checks and worked to ensure that firearms are safely stored. These laws help save lives. But the easy availability of homemade gun kits undermine many of these laws and put our communities at risk. Anyone can go online to a gun show or even to some gun dealers and buy a kit with all of the parts and tools necessary to build a firearm at home. People who couldn't pass a background check, including children, people who are the subject of domestic violence or extreme risk protection orders, or anyone with any other disqualifying history can, within an afternoon, have a fully functional firearm. They have been used to perpetrate mass shootings, commit robbery, and assault.
And then, of course, there was this piece of testimony by Francis Owen.
Prohibited purchasers, gun traffickers, and others buy or build ghost guns, first, to acquire them without having to pass a background check, and second, to prevent law enforcement from tracing the guns back to them if those weapons are ever used to commit a crime. This approach is clearly intentional, preemptive obstruction of justice and amply deserves to be penalized. Background checks offer a clear path for identifying who should and shouldn't own a gun, and we should ensure that every gun owner has passed one.
Miss Abilene Klein, the Washington State NRA attorney, again testified on this bill. She does a really nice job of testifying. Her testimony included the following.
House Bill 1705 is a solution in search of a problem. Proponents of this legislation and previous testimony have told you that these so-called ghost guns are rampant in the streets of Washington and are a threat to public safety. This fits nicely with the narrative of national gun groups, whose end goal is to dismantle the Second Amendment, but it doesn't fit here in Washington. In fact, the Washington Association of Sheriffs and Police Chiefs have informed the NRA that they don't even collect data on these so-called ghost guns. Precluding an individual from manufacturing a firearm without first obtaining government approval infringes on the centuries-old tradition of manufacturing a personal firearm for self-defense. Given the nature of criminals and the scope of existing firearm restrictions, House Bill 1705 will do nothing to keep weapons out of the hands of those who shouldn't have them. And still, this bill threatens to turn thousands of Washingtonians into criminals overnight. House Bill 1705 far exceeds federal law and regulation. It's based on a proposed rule that the ATF has repeatedly failed to get adopted because it's riddled with flaws.
And then finally, and I do find it odd that we start with statements for and end with statements for, but, the whole terminology ghost gun, and I've used it myself because that's the title I've used for some of my presentations, and I'm guilty of it myself, but the terminology ghost gun is a terminology that anti-gunners have given to untraceable firearms or homemade firearms. Now, There's a lot of misinformation that goes about this issue, as there is on many gun control issues. Of those who are interested in taking away your Second Amendment rights are not too interested in letting the facts get in the way of their positions. But there's a lot of misinformation that's also given on this issue, and occasionally some people drink all the Kool-Aid. Nancy Dombrowski, who lives in Seattle's Central District, says the following.
I'm here to speak in support of House Bill 1705. As you've heard, this bill clarifies existing state law to keep guns out of dangerous hands. We're met almost every day with news about the harm caused by ghost guns. Federal law enforcement now warns that such homemade firearms are becoming the favorite tool of white supremacists and criminals. Police outside Seattle in 2019 seized ghost gun material from the leader of a neo-Nazi group implicated in several homicides and bomb plots. The NRA and the Second Amendment extremists want us to believe a guns everywhere agenda makes us safer. They tell us do-it-yourself gun making is an innocuous hobby protected by the Constitution. This is not true or normal.
And listen, I'm not going to dispute right now what Nancy's saying for the sake of this video, but I'm fairly certain that there's not a lot of white supremacist activity occurring in Seattle's Central District. Listen, as you know, the legislative session is up March 10th. This is headed into executive session. I honestly do believe that this has a very significant chance of being signed, and if so, it will be signed and the law will be effective September 10th of 2022. Listen, you may have more questions about House Bill 1705 or anything related to your Second Amendment rights, and if you do, don't ever hesitate to contact us at WashingtonGunLaw.com, or of course you call us directly at 425-765-0487. Now let's remember, part of being the lawful and responsible gun owner, like we talk about all the time here at Washington Gun Law, is to know what the law is in every situation and how it applies to you in any instance that you may find yourself. Until next time, thanks for watching. Stay safe.